My name's GlenSmith. My age right now is 58. I grew up and was born and raised in Oklahoma and lived in Oklahoma until I went into the military, into the Marine Corps in 1971 actually. And I was in for 2 years during the Vietnam War. The Marine Corps had a 2-year enlistment. So I was in for 2 years. Basically I was there between 71 and 73. I was in the military. And I was overseas for a year, stationed out of Okinawa during the Vietnam period, and also spent some time off the coast of Vietnam around the demilitarized zone. Back towards the end of the war, we were off the coast actually when they signed the peace treaty in January of '73 and disbanded our float and sent us all back. So I was kind of at the tail end of the Vietnam War period and never was in the country, but was off the coast on some support ships that provided support for forces that worked along the coastal area and picked up pilots that were shot down from some of the bombing raids over Hanoi. I actually volunteered, and I was 18. I remember turning 19 when I was in boot camp, actually. I more or less went into the military because I didn't have a good direction in what I wanted to do as far as academics. I'd actually finished a year of college, but before I went in. So for that reason, and the fact that, you know, the adventure of the travel and adventure of doing something and the realization that you'd have your college paid for after you got out was probably a bigger attraction than anything. So. My family was really against it, actually. Not really real verbal, but you know, they did kind of try and persuade me not to. Which surprised me a little bit because my father's family was very much in the military during World War II in the Pacific. I was kind of neutral about the political situation, I guess you'd say. But I kind of looked with disdain a little bit about the people my age that were protesting against the war, you know, and it was mostly the West Coast people out here that were doing that. But, you know, in retrospect, I see, you know, where they were coming from. It's a lot like, you know, Afghanistan and Iraq and stuff are. It's kind of vague on a political scale what you really gain out of it or why you need to be there, you know. I was there to you know, do what I was told as far as and trust that the people above me were figuring out all the politics, I guess. So. No, the time I spent in Vietnam and got Vietnam service for, we were off the coast on ships as backup support in case they needed us or our materials. We had tanks and troop carriers and a whole battalion of Marines on 4 different ships that if they needed us, they would land us in and we would go in. And so we never went in, but sometimes we would send our tracked vehicles in for the ground forces, even the South Vietnamese forces, I think the ARVN forces, to use, and then they would bring them back to the ships. We would be called to pick up pilots that ejected out of downed aircraft and stuff like that ended up in the water. I know we did that a couple of times. A typical day would be, you know, they would call us together. We'd have breakfast and they would call us together for a muster just to make sure everybody's there and who was sick and so on and so forth, and kind of give us the day report of what might happen or what we needed to be ready for. Then they'd take us up on the helicopter deck and make us do calisthenics. At night they had total darkness on the decks. You know, you couldn't have any lights out on the. You couldn't go smoke a cigarette even out on the deck. And I noticed it was always interesting when you were inside in your berthing area. In our berthing area, open right out to the main door. As soon as somebody opened the door, the lights would go out in the berthing area because they didn't want it shining out on the deck. And so you'd be in there reading or something or playing cards, you know, and somebody would open the door and all of a sudden the lights would go out. The one hardship was there were 4 bunks along one wall, which were really just canvas. It looked like a stretcher, you know. That's what you slept in, you know. And if you were on the bottom bunk or one of the lower bunks, people would climb over you to get to the bunks above you, you know, and things like that. So the living situation, you know, wasn't high class, but that's what you get in the military, you know. So it didn't surprise me, or didn't. I was young then, you know. When I was there, and this is on Okinawa, an old girlfriend of mine was in some sort of a singing group, USO type thing, that came there and was at the show. I can't remember whether I knew she was going to be there in that, or whether I just showed up and I saw her. But anyway, that was kind of interesting. Yeah, a girl I went to high school with and was a girlfriend. They signed the peace treaty. I think it started January the 1st of 1973, but the last American troops and stuff didn't get out of there until 75. I can't remember which month, but so there was a couple of years of just the drawdown and North Vietnamese coming in and taking back over. And since that, the hostilities basically had stopped for, theoretically anyway, they just said, okay, we don't need these extra troops sitting off the coast for support, so they just sent us back to Okinawa. I remember I was kind of bummed because the next day we were supposed to go to Hong Kong for our R&R, you know, our leave. Always carry out your last order first, meaning whoever the senior officer is, if he tells you something that contradicts somebody who told you before, you always follow the last order first, you know.